Let us begin. February 2nd marks a special day in liturgical calendar. I mean, in any calendar. I mean, today is James Joyce's birthday, if you are into literature. One of the most Irish guy who wrote all of his Irish works outside of Ireland. You know, he spent most of his days in Switzerland, and still yet he's considered Irish guy. Okay, so the world is a strange thing, and the calendar is a strange thing. Why do we celebrate February 2nd? Because February 2nd is 40 days, exactly 40 days after Christmas. You know, if we believe Christ was born December 25th. Sorry, I know we have this long tradition of celebrating December 25th. I have my own views on that. I'm not gonna share it because then you will not invite me anymore. But seriously speaking, regardless of the date, 40 days after, and we'll talk about this during worship service because we will have a text from Luke. Okay, 40 days after, according to Torah, according to the institutions or teaching, or what we call the law of Moses, okay, Mary had to come and do some ritual, and they also presented Jesus as a firstborn, you know, to the Lord. Okay, there's another story. With this in mind, you know, we have purification of Mary and presentation of our Lord, but our Old Testament reading is 1 Samuel 1. And I've said it more than once, so therefore there is no reason to hide it. Sometimes I'm puzzled, how did they pick up this reading? Because the thing is, if you open the pages, and I understand it's the birth of Shmuel, or Samuel as we call him, and then his mother, Hannah, decides to stay for a while at home. Then she goes to the place where sanctuary, where the sanctuary is. It's not a temple, it's a tabernacle. We'll talk about timeline too. And then she has a conversation with high priest Eli. Right after that, there is her beautiful song in chapter 2. Why they did not include the song? I don't know. Why they did not include the pre-story of why it is important to understand that Hannah gets pregnant. Okay, there are many women. Some of them get pregnant, some of them not. Okay, well, what's the problem? But there is a problem. Okay, the story starts, Samuel 1, verse 1. There was a certain man in Ramathaim Zophim, in the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, son of Toru, son of Zophah, Ephrathite. Okay, he had two wives. The one name was Hannah, another one was Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, and Hannah did not have children. Okay, and so on and so forth. Okay, the whole thing about Hannah being barren at this particular time is important. We know it is important when we read the whole Bible together. Okay? Few things. Let's have a general timeline. Okay? 40 and 45, we had Exodus. Okay? In about 1,000 years, and we are in BC. Okay? Just in case. About 1,000 years BC, temple was built by Solomon. Okay, roughly about 500. I mean, not roughly. We know 586 BC, temple was destroyed. Okay, so this is our time. So let's say this is like 30 AD. That's the time of cross, and so on and so forth. Okay, where we are in this timeline, we are somewhere over here. Okay, which gives us another like 200 years. So let's say this is roughly, 1200 BC. How do we know that? We have a reign of Solomon, we have a reign of David, and we have a reign of Saul. And who anointed, not who anoint, but who anointed Saul and David?
Samuel.
It was Samuel. So we are talking about birth of Samuel. The cool thing is, when we put history together, when we put different historical books together, there is another miraculous guy was born at this time. Another guy, so we have Samuel here. We have another guy, Samson. These guys worked together. He was in the temple. He was in, I don't want to say he was in the army. I mean, he was like those Rambo guys, independent warrior. This kind of stuff. There is, what?
A mercenary.
Okay.
Maybe that's not the right term.
Let's, if we will go back to the book of Judges for a second, there is another third important character, which is roughly from this period of time. We do not know her name, and specifically her.
Where are we in Judges?
We are in Judges chapter 11. Yes? No. Okay, there is a guy named Jephthah. Okay? And in chapter 11 and 12, there is an odd story. And it looks like he sacrificed his daughter. Okay? He did not. Okay? If we know biblical text, he did not sacrifice anybody. What happened is, he dedicated her to the sanctuary. So she became, the head of Lutheran Women Missionary League. Seriously. Because what we have is she led women in their spiritual growth. Okay, so simultaneously we have three guys working, and the problem is, why do we need three guys very actively work in Israel? The problem is that we do really have a serious mess up with the leadership, and we are under control of Philistines on one side and Ammonites on the other side. Okay, so now if we are into geography, a little bit of geography. So this is our land. If you can see it, can you see it? Okay, cool. Now I guess you cannot see it. Okay, let's move it away. So this is our Israel as a whole. 12 tribes here. That Sea, Galilean Sea, Jordan. This is Mediterranean Sea. And things like that. So somewhere over here, we do not really possess these places. That's a future Jerusalem. The Jerusalem was conquered by David. Okay, we kind of owe this land, but it's not really ours yet. Over here, there is a Shiloh. Okay, and that's where tabernacle is. Okay, so two of these guys do work at Shiloh. Samson mostly fights with Philistines, or I will dare to make that connection with Palestinians. Okay, the word Palestinians come from Philistines. It's the same word. Okay, they are not related by blood. These guys, the Philistines, are related to Egyptians of old age Egyptians. Okay, and modern Palestinians is a completely different story. but they live in the same piece of land, okay? And in some sense, they have the same, create same type of troubles or problems. However you treat this, Israel conflict. So that's the guy. We have other guys, Ammonites, and here is Moabites, are actually Moabites. Okay, actually are relatively distant relatives. That's a weird phrase, but these guys are sons of Lot. Okay, remember this wonderful story? Lot ran away with his wife and two of his daughters out of Sodom, and then wife, turned back. She turned into pile, well packaged, sold, so this kind of stuff. With two daughters, he crossed the place, and he tried to settle, and daughters decided to have kids. They could not come up with anything else but to drunken their dad and have relationship with him. And I still puzzled with that story, because if you are drunken so much that you have no clue what's going on, being a man, you can hardly perform. So if you can't perform, that means you are not drunken as much. So you kind of know what's going on. So it's like, man, what kind of dad are you? I don't know. So it's a weird story. We have very interesting stories in the Bible. That's what makes Bible very lively. Let's put it this way. In many other ancient divine or heroic stories, heroes or divine figures especially, they're always blameless, they are perfect, everything is fine. The one guy who is blameless in the Bible is God. Okay, everybody else, you don't know. That's why we can relate to them. Because when we look at our lives, when I look at my life, there are some things that I would prefer not to repeat or not even do in the first place. So, okay, that's our story. We are roughly here. The problem is, again, we are under attack from two sides, and somehow the leadership of this time is not performing right. One of the sides of leadership is a high priest. Now let's jump back to the 1 Samuel. One of the signs, okay, that he is not doing right, and I will tell you later one more sign. 1 Samuel chapter 1 verse 12. Okay, the Hannah, while you're opening, the story is, okay, Elkanah has two wives, and he, being a very devoted Jew, he was a great believer, because he had the commandment that he needs to travel to the sanctuary X number of times of years, or at least once a year, for the main feast, and he did it. Every year, he grabbed all his family, and they went for a feast. Whatever feast it is, was it the tabernacle, was it the Passover, was it what we call Pentecost or Shavuot? We don't really know. It's not important. The important thing is he did go. Okay, in one of these occasions, Hannah broke out almost in tears and started to pray. He prayed, moving her lips, but nobody could hear anything what's going on. Okay? So, now, verse 12. As she continued praying before the Lord, Eli, high priest, observed her mouth. Hannah was speaking in her heart, only her lips moved and her voice was not heard. Therefore, Eli took her to be a drunken woman. Now think about that. High priest does not know how a sincerely praying person looks like. Does he have a regular prayer life? Okay? So, we don't know. I cannot definitely say no, he doesn't. But it's like, it's odd. It's weird. Something is really wrong. And that's a high priest. And later on, okay, in chapter 2, we find out that, let's say chapter 2, verse 22, for example. It's not the only one, but let's say verse 12 again. Chapter 2, verse 12. Now the sons of Eli were worthless men. They did not know the Lord. I understand that sometimes pastors' sons or daughters or children are not really great in their faith walk. Okay? Okay?
Yeah.
That's okay. It's not okay, but what I mean is, it happens. But if you being in the leadership, if you are like the Pope of Jews of those days, would you place them in the bishop's office? Because these guys were still ministering at the tabernacle. We understand stuff happens. People broke up being adults with the relationship with the Lord. It not necessarily even reflects that they were taught wrong. It was their choice. But what the choice of Eli was is keep using them as priests. Read, you kind of puzzled. Okay, read further. Verse 13. The custom of the priests with the people was that when any man offered a sacrifice and a priest's servant would come, while the meat was boiling with a 3-point fork in his hand, and he would thrust it into the pan and the kettle or a cauldron or pot, and all the fork was brought up, the priest would take for himself. And this is what they did at Shiloh to all the Israelites who came there. Okay. Moreover, there is even serious problems. Verse 17. Thus the sins of the young man was very great in the sight of the Lord, for the man treated the offering of the Lord with contempt. Okay. So, couple things about that, just very fast, because we need to stay with our text. Usually, people would come to the tabernacle, to the place where the sacrifice is done, and there is a procedure. You take an animal, priest is observing the animal, so if no blame spot, nothing wrong with an animal is the right age, right condition, everything is fine, then you sacrifice an animal, then you either boil or you fry it or so on and so forth, that all fat goes to the Lord, okay? Then, depending on the sacrifice, after procedure is done, priest can either take some portion or share it with the worshiper, or everything goes to the Lord. What happens here is, before everything was done, priests, one of those two sons, both of them, did the same thing. They would come and take whatever they desired. So they would take portion of the Lord and portion of the worshiper. Okay? Therefore we have the hearts of people were turning off the Lord. Not off those guys. Because, in a sense, sorry, who cares for those guys? But the people were distracted from the worship because of that. And that was not the only one. They also assaulted women at the tabernacle, at the worship place. So maybe one of them who was assaulted was daughter of Jephthah, and maybe Samuel did defend her. So that's one of the things. So with this kind of historical background, now let us read what we have for today's text. Verse 21. The man Elkanah and all his house went up to offer the Lord the yearly sacrifice and pay his vows. So we are in chapter 1, verse 21. I thought you know Bible by heart.
No problem.
Okay.
So whoever said it, next time I come I will test. But seriously. So again, he is in his yearly routine. And that's great. Sometimes we are told that, there is no need to have a routine, to have a liturgy, to have a regular repeated phrases in the church. Everything always should be new, sincere, right off our heart. First of all, I don't understand why I cannot do it right off my heart, reading, the liturgy. What's the problem with that? It doesn't mean that I'm reading a text, I'm not reading it sincerely, okay? The thing is, that's how your faith habit is built. Year after year, we repeat some important things. We remember some important events. Either it's Christmas, or it's Easter, or it's purification, or it's a baptism, or it's our baptism. okay, or the day of our confirmation, it is important. Yes, sir.
I was just thinking today's text, when they bring Jesus to the temple, that just reminded me that Joseph took his family to Jerusalem for all these same feasts.
Yes and no. We'll talk about that. Okay. So, but what I mean is, he is into this thing. So we cannot call him lukewarm Christian just because he did the rituals. The rituals have nothing to do with being lukewarm. It is a heart condition. If you do them with a full heart, you're great. You know, if you don't do them with lukewarm heart, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's just a outer experience that you go through, and actually it was instituted by the Lord. So he was faithful to the Lord. But Hannah did not go up, for she said to her husband, as soon as child is weaned, I will bring him, so that he may appear to the presence of the Lord and dwell there forever. Okay? We are not going to go there, but if we'll jump back for a little while in the first, see, that's why the whole story is like from 1 verse 1 to the middle of chapter 2. Okay? But what she said, when she prayed to the Lord, she said two things. First of all, if I will have a son, I will dedicate it to you, O Lord. Plus, the way she describes the guy, he will become a Nazarene. Okay? He will be under permanent Nazarene vows. By the way, same as Samson. Okay? So, no shaving head, so like a beardy guy, lots of hair and, stuff like that. And usually people immediately remember, he should not drink. And therefore, Jesus had a Nazarene vow, but he didn't, use wine. He used only grape juice. The only problem is that Nazarene vows does not require, not only stop you from using wine, they stop you from using any type of grapes. So, no juice either. No raisins. Nothing. So, that's the thing. But both of these guys, Samuel and Samson, were under permanent Nazarene vow. Okay, there are a few other important things. So she decided to stay with the guy to win him by herself, and then Elkanah, the husband who really loved her, said, "Do what seems best to you." Verse 23. Wait until you will win him, and only may the Lord establish his word. Okay, because most likely, as good husband and wife, good spouses, they have talked about what happened. And he is really eager to see the fulfillment of the word of the Lord. Okay, so verse 24. And when she had weaned him, she took him up with her along with a 3-year-old bull, the ephah of flour, and a skin of wine, and she brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh. Okay? So, 3 things. First of all, most likely 3-year-old bull corresponds to the age of a guy. Okay? To Samuel's Samuel's age. So that's why she takes a 3-year-old. Because he was 3-year-old. Because the sacrifice works as a substitution in some sense. Okay? Almost any sacrifice with an animal, what happened is you have an animal and the worshiper will not, in our Bibles it's usually translated, he would put the hands over the head of an animal, but actually he would like lean over the head of an animal. So he will be like going into, the animal, so animal will represent him. Okay? Interestingly enough, in the story, a little bit further, okay, verse 25, when they slaughtered the bull, they brought the child to Eli, okay? But she didn't bring bull only. There were 2 other things. What were they?
Wine and flour.
Flour, and you do what out of flour?
Wine.
Bread and wine, okay?
Lord's Supper.
Yep. Okay? That's the thing that should click. And the thing is, the bull is used for sacrifice. These 2 things were given to the priest, or in this particular case, to the high priest, as a gift. But that's the proper gift, bread and wine, and we have this thread of bread and wine through the whole scripture, all over the place. Sometimes it's not as obvious, but it is still important to notice. Let's jump for 1 second into Proverbs 31. There is a song of blessed woman.
Perfect life.
Yeah, this perfect wife.
Proverbs what?
31.
31.
Last book.
Yeah, 31, the very last chapter of Proverbs. And let me find the verse 16. Okay, she considers a field and buys it, and the fruit of her hands she plants a vineyard. Okay, field. What do you do in the field?
Work.
Okay,
Grow.
grow what?
Grapes.
Grapes.
Nah, no, wheat. Okay, so that's your bread, and vineyard is your wine. Okay, so it's like those two symbols, they go together. Okay, so you have bread from the field, and you have vineyard, and therefore you have wine. Okay, let's go back. So when you pay attention to these kind of details, like in today's gospel reading, I hope you'll notice something. We'll see. So we are still in verse 24. So along with 3-year-old bull and an ephah of flour and a skin of wine, and she brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh, and the child was young. Okay, so in Hebrew is the Na'ar. Okay, the young one was young. The problem is why we need to notice that, because later on the same word Na'ar in Hebrew, okay, will appear in chapter 2, and it will be designated both to Samuel and the sons of Eli. But since sons of Eli were priests, and the priest's ordination takes place at age 30, we know they were not like boys. They were grown-up servant guys. Okay? So that's why in this particular case, in this chapter, author specifies that this servant boy was, at this moment, he still was young. Okay? Then he grows up and starts to minister. There is another, as I said, 3 things. Important thing here is before she brought him to Eli, it says that she brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh. So, in some sense, Eli, the high priest, he kind of adopts Samuel into his family. He treats him as his son, which is good. Okay? On the other hand, we know from chapter 2 and 3 that he actually even during the night, he would stay in the court side of the house of the Lord. So, in reality, he is adopted by whom? By the Lord himself. Okay, he is a son of God in some sense. He is a very dedicated prophet.